You're in charge of implementing the First Step Act, Director?
That's correct.
How many criminals have you released under the First Step Act?
So First Step Act for the overall release since the initiation of the First Step Act is, I have that exact number in front of me.
You don't know off the top of your head?
Sorry, Senator. So 70% of those that were released, we have about 30,000 individuals that have been released since the passage of the First Step Act.
All right, so you've released 30,000 criminals under the First Step Act. Okay? And how many of them, before you released them, did you contact any of their victims to say we're about to let this guy out?
Senator, it's my understanding that that notification happens through the U.S. Attorney's Office, but I will check into that and get back to you.
You don't know?
Senator.
Welcome to America Viewpoint, where we speak the truth, defend our freedoms, and fight for the values that made this nation great. No censorship, no woke spin, just bold, unfiltered commentary from real Americans who love this country. If you're tired of the lies and ready to stand for faith, family, and freedom, hit that like button, subscribe, and ring the Liberty Bell, because this is where the fight begins. Patriots, you've got to see this to believe it. Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana sat across from Colette Peters, Joe Biden's hand-picked director of the Bureau of Prisons, and asked her the most basic, common-sense questions. How many criminals have you released under the First Step Act? Were victims notified before their attackers were set free? How many of those 30,000 criminals committed more crimes after release? And time after time, her answer was, I don't know. Kennedy was stunned. He literally sat back, shook his head, and muttered, "Oh my God, oh my God." And honestly, that was the only sane reaction. Because what we witnessed wasn't just ignorance. It wasn't just incompetence. It was the perfect picture of why Americans don't trust government anymore. Let's break it down piece by piece. So even if you haven't seen the original video, you'll walk away knowing exactly what happened, why it matters, and what it says about the state of justice in this country.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, how are you?
I'm doing well. Good to see you again, Senator.
I'm a big fan. Director Peters, you're the director of the Bureau of Prisons, is that right?
That's correct, sir.
You used to run the correction system in Oregon, right?
That's correct.
Yeah. Oregon legalized drugs, is that right?
That's correct.
Oregon's about to reverse that, is that correct?
Senator, I'm not familiar with the policy proposed to reverse that.
Oh, you've just ignored Oregon?
Oregon still has a very special place in my heart, sir.
Okay. You haven't read any of the articles about the reversal?
I haven't, Senator.
You don't know anything about it?
Correct, sir.
Okay, wow. You're in charge of implementing the First Step Act, Director?
That's correct.
How many criminals have you released under the First Step Act?
So First Step Act for the overall release since the initiation of the First Step Act is, I have that exact number in front of me.
You don't know off the top of your head?
Sorry, Senator. So 70% of those that were released, we have about 30,000 individuals that have been released since the passage of the First Step Act.
All right, so you've released 30,000 criminals under the First Step Act. Okay? And how many of them, before you released them, did you contact any of their victims to say we're about to let this guy out?
Senator, it's my understanding that that notification happens through the U.S. Attorney's Office, but I will check into that and get back to you.
You don't know?
Senator, I don't.
Have you followed up with the U.S. attorneys to say, do you have a system to say, hey, we're about to let this guy out? Would we want to be sure the victim's contacted?
As a former victim's advocate, I share that value, that victim notification should happen. I'll check on the process.
But you don't know if it's happening?
That's correct, Senator.
Wow. Okay, of the 30,000 criminals you let free, how many of them have come back? Have committed a crime again, hurt somebody else?
So that number is one that we're still looking at as it relates to the recidivism rate for those that were released on the First Step Act.
You don't have any idea?
No, Senator.
You don't have anybody at the Bureau that can count?
I do not have that number in front of me today,
So let me get
Senator.
this straight. The First Step Act was passed in 2018. This is 2024, am I right so far?
That's correct.
That's 6 years. And in 6 years, you've let 30,000 criminals go, right?
That's correct.
And you don't have the slightest idea how many of them committed another crime and came back.
I don't have that number in front of me today,
And you
sir.
run the Bureau of Prisons.
That's correct.
And how many employees do you have?
About 40,000 employees.
Oh, my God. Oh, my God. General, I know you got a lot to do, but could you give us a hand here? And let's find out whether the First Step Act worked. And how many, if we've released 30,000 criminals after 6 years, our director here doesn't know how many have committed another crime and come back? Can you help us?
Senator, I can certainly follow up on that issue. I will just say in terms of work we've done in the past, for example, on compassionate release, and going to the Bureau of Prisons, this is before Director Peters was there, and asking them for data on compassionate release, because that was one of the issues that has come up.
Excuse me for interrupting, but I'm not talking about compassionate release.
No, I understand.
You know,
I'm
my
just saying-
colleagues said, we were told that it would save money and it would be in the interest of public safety to release criminals from prison. I didn't vote for it, but the majority rules. And so Congress did it. And Ms. Peters, Director Peters at the Bureau of Prisons, and her colleagues released 30,000 criminals, all of whom are there for a reason, okay? They didn't just go to prison for a free toaster. They were there for a reason. And so her department let them go, and after 6 years, we don't have the slightest idea. Not a single one of the 40,000 of her employees know how many have committed a second crime and come back. So how the hell are we supposed to figure out whether it worked?
Senator,
Your people ought to hide their head in a bag, Director, that you can't come here in front of this Congress and answer that question. I'm sorry, I interrupted you with my speech.
No, that's okay. I was just going to, my bottom line point on it was, I've often looked to those questions on things like compassionate release and other programs. And one of the challenges we found is the department just doesn't have good data on that. Halfway houses. Congress is spending about $500 million a year on halfway houses. There's really not great recidivism data on that either. How well are they working?
Before we do this, we need to find out. Look, I believe in justice. I believe in treating everybody fairly. But there are people out there, I don't know why, if I make it to heaven, I'm going to ask. They're not mixed up. They're not confused. They're not sick. It's not that their mama or daddy didn't love them or not enough. They just hurt other people, and they take other people's stuff, and we have to separate them from society. And the director let 30,000 of these folks go and can't tell me today how many have come back. I just find it takes my breath away. With 40,000 people. How many of your 40,000 people are actually coming to work or are still working from home, Director?
The supermajority of our employees come to work every day because we're running 24/7
What percentage are coming to work every day?
The percentage is quite high. I don't have the exact
You
number.
don't know?
But
Well, maybe there's your problem.
the supermajority of our individuals come to
If
work
they're not coming
at
to
our
work, they
institutions.
can't give us the answer. I've gone over. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman. This is why people hate government and don't trust government.
So I'd like to respond concerning the Grassley-Durbin First Step Act signed into law by President
I
Donald
thought you
Trump.
might have a response.
By President Donald Trump. I almost want to repeat that because this notion that it's soft on crime, I don't consider Chuck Grassley soft on crime. I don't consider Donald Trump soft on crime. Let me tell you the numbers that we have. Some 30,000 released. The recidivism rate for people released under the First Step Act is 12.4%. 7 out of every 8 individuals released under the law have not been rearrested or charged with a new crime. By comparison, DOJ estimates that in the decade before the First Step Act was passed, 43% of the people formerly incarcerated in BOP were rearrested within 3 years of their release. Is the First Step Act working? I would submit it is.
Would you yield for a question, Mr. Chair?
When I finish.
I'm sorry. Excuse me for interrupting.
The point I'm making is we decided with the Trump administration and Senator Grassley's leadership that we were going to take a different approach to releasing people from prison. We would give them an opportunity to be trained, educated, skilled, in many ways more prepared for release, because 80%, I believe, in the system are going to be released someday. We don't want to commit another crime or create another victim. I would submit this is a success. Don't put your head in a bag, or whatever Senator suggested. Stand up tall and try to make it better, and I'm ready to do that. But the First Step Act was a constructive reform of the penal system, and I think it was a good idea and stand by it. I'll submit to your question.
Thank you. And I appreciate, as usual, Dick, you made good points. Here's my point. I didn't vote for the First Step Act because I was afraid this was going to happen. And what I hear you saying is that of the 30,000 that the director released, over 3,000 committed another crime and are back. Here's my question. How come you know that and she doesn't?
Because she's probably looking
And the
for
40,000 people at the Bureau of Prisons who are supposed to give us this information don't know.
I'd like to say in all fairness, she's under oath, and I think when you ask for numbers, she wants to make sure she tells you a number she can live with. I have this information. I think it's probably close to being 100% accurate, but I wouldn't say under oath it is. So I think give her a fair opportunity to respond. I mean, it just might not be the type of thing that comes rolling off the tongue.
It's not your job, and I appreciate the information, and I'd like to see the study that shows that. I just don't understand why the director has no idea.
Well,
She didn't say she was uncertain, and she wanted to go back and check. She said, I don't know. And I just find that extraordinary.
I'm assuming since she's under oath that it's an honest answer. We have two other individuals who are seeking a second round. I believe Senator Booker is first.
I hate to distract you from my questions, but I just want.
Senator Kennedy starts respectfully enough. He greets Peters, reminds her that she used to run Oregon's correctional system, and asks about Oregon's drug policies. Oregon famously legalized drugs, a radical social experiment that's already gone sideways. So Kennedy asks the obvious. Isn't Oregon now moving to reverse course? Peters' response? I'm not familiar with that. Patriots, think about that. She once ran that very system. She now runs the nation's prisons. And she hasn't even read the articles about a drug policy reversal in her own former state. That's not leadership. That's detachment. And it set the tone for the entire hearing. Kennedy then zeroes in on the First Step Act. He asks how many criminals were released under the law since 2018. Peters stumbles. She doesn't know the number off the top of her head. After fumbling, she finally admits it's about 30,000 people. 30,000. That's the equivalent of an entire mid-sized American city, emptied out of prison and dumped back into our neighborhoods. And Kennedy presses further. Before you release them, did you notify their victims? Did you give families a chance to prepare? Her answer, I don't know. She says maybe the U.S. Attorney's Office handles that, but she isn't certain. She hasn't followed up. She can't say whether victims were ever warned. Patriots, this is more than bureaucracy. This is betrayal, because real victims, real families were forgotten. And that's not justice. That's abandonment. Then comes the moment that left Kennedy and the rest of us speechless. He asked the most obvious question of all. Of the 30,000 criminals you released, how many committed new crimes? How many hurt people again? Her answer, I don't know. Not, I'll get back to you. Not, we're tracking it. Just flat-out ignorance. Kennedy reminds her, the First Step Act was passed in 2018. It's now 2024. 6 years later, the Bureau of Prisons, with 40,000 employees, can't tell Congress whether the release of 30,000 criminals was a success or a disaster. Kennedy literally throws up his hands and says, oh my God, oh my God. And Patriots, that's the only honest reaction. Because if government can't even measure whether a program makes America safer or more dangerous, then the program has already failed. Kennedy nails it. This is why people hate government and don't trust government. Because here's the pattern we keep seeing. Congress passes feel-good laws. Agencies release thousands of criminals back into our communities. And when asked for results, the bureaucrats shrug and say, "We don't know." Americans don't distrust government because they're cynical. They distrust it because they see a government that forgets victims, ignores data, and hides behind excuses. Where's the accountability? Where's the leadership? Where's the basic competence? Now, to be fair, Senator Dick Durbin jumps in to defend the First Step Act. He cites numbers the director couldn't provide. He claims recidivism for released inmates is 12.4%. He contrasts that with the old figure, 43%. If true, those numbers suggest the program lowered repeat offenses. But here's the scandal. Durbin had the stats. The director didn't. Why can a senator pull numbers from folder while the woman running the Bureau of Prisons sits clueless before Congress? That's the core problem. It's not just whether the program works. It's that the very people responsible for public safety can't even speak with authority about it. That's not leadership. That's surrender. Durbin framed the law as compassion. He said it was designed with President Trump and Senator Grassley's support to prepare inmates for release through education and training. He insisted that 7 out of 8 released inmates have not reoffended. And listen, Patriots, rehabilitation has its place. But Kennedy cut through the spin with brutal honesty. He reminded the room that some people aren't just misunderstood. They're not victims of circumstance. Some people simply choose to hurt others. And when they do, our job as a society is not to coddle them. It's to protect the innocent by keeping them separated from law-abiding citizens. Justice isn't about excuses. Justice is about accountability. And accountability was completely missing in that hearing. This hearing wasn't just about one law. It was about the larger crisis of law and order in America. We see cities where violent criminals are released on no-bail policies. We see prosecutors who refuse to prosecute. We see police departments handcuffed while repeat offenders roam free. And now, we see the Federal Bureau of Prisons unable to account for 30,000 releases. This is the fruit of soft-on-crime ideology. Policies that treat criminals like victims and treat victims like afterthoughts. And patriots, a nation that refuses to uphold justice, cannot last. As the hearing wound down, Kennedy asked one more question. Of the Bureau's 40,000 employees, how many even show up to work in person? Peters gave a vague answer about this supermajority coming in. No numbers. No details. Kennedy's response? Maybe that's the problem. Maybe too many employees are working from home. Maybe that's why the Bureau can't track data, can't notify victims, can't answer basic questions. And then he delivered the closing line that summed up the whole fiasco. This is why people don't trust government. Patriots, truer words have never been spoken. So let's step back. What does this hearing really tell us? It tells us that public safety has taken a back seat to political posturing. It tells us that victims are being forgotten while criminals are prioritized. It tells us that Americans are right to feel unsafe and distrustful of the system. And it tells us that without leaders like Senator John Kennedy, who cut through the spin and demand answers, this corruption of justice would continue unchecked. This is America Viewpoint, where we don't whisper, we roar. We stand tall, speak loud, and never back down from defending truth and liberty. If this message fired you up, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications, because the fight for America doesn't end when the video does. Until next time, stay strong, stay free, and may God bless the United States of America.